The sun had been scorching the desert for hours, and the air shimmered with heat. Sand stretched in every direction, broken only by the jagged remnants of metal and stone that hinted at a world once alive with industry. Jace Arden moved carefully across the dunes, his boots sinking slightly with each step. The wind carried dust that stung his eyes, but he had long learned to ignore it. Life out here was never easy, and easy meant survival was impossible. He had lived in this desert for nearly a decade. He knew the hidden paths, the waterless craters, and the scattered ruins where the desperate could find shelter. It was a hard life, one that demanded constant attention and quick thinking, and yet it suited him. Jace did not belong in crowded cities. Crowds were slow, soft, and careless. Here every decision could mean life or death, and that kind of clarity was rare and precious. He had just rounded a crumbling ridge when he spotted them. Two small figures huddled together in the shadow of an old rock formation. One was taller, thin, and seemed fragile in the blistering heat. The other was much smaller, clinging tightly to the taller figure's side. Something about the way they moved, cautious and trembling, told Jace they were running from something or someone. Most people in the desert were solitary scavengers like him or bandits looking to take what they wanted, but these two were different. They weren't human. Their skin had a soft shimmer like the surface of water reflecting light, and their eyes were large, dark, and wary. Jace froze for a moment studying them. Curiosity, not caution, came first. He had heard of alien refugees before, but encounters were rare and dangerous. The taller one, a female, looked up briefly, and their eyes met. Jace saw fear, sharp and raw, but also exhaustion. She had been running for days, maybe weeks. And the child's gaze was curious, though guarded, as if trying to understand the strange human who had stopped at the ridge. Jace weighed his options. The desert had no mercy, and helping them could draw the attention of the local bandits. He had faced them before. They were ruthless, violent, and quick to kill anyone who interfered with their business. But something in him stirred, a sense he hadn't felt in years, compassion, maybe even responsibility. He stepped forward slowly, careful not to startle them. "Hey," he called in a low, calm voice. "You need help. I know what it's like to run from people who want to do you harm. You can trust me." Jace nodded. "I can give you water, food too. There's an old outpost not far from here. Come with me." He moved toward them slowly, making sure not to rush or scare them. The journey was slow. The desert was unforgiving, and the woman Lyra, as she finally whispered her name, had little strength left. Jace offered water from his canteen and shared a small amount of dried rations. The child, Kilo, drank carefully, his tiny hands trembling as he held the canteen. It was a simple act, but in that moment it felt monumental. They were surviving, and that small victory mattered more than anything else. By the time the old outpost came into view, the sun was sinking low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the sand. The outpost was a relic of the old world, a skeletal structure of metal and stone. It had no power, no running water, but it offered shelter. Jace had used it himself in the past, fortifying it with traps and barricades to keep out scavengers and bandits. It was far from luxurious, but it was safe, at least for now. Inside, he guided Lyra and Kilo to a corner room. It was small, with a cracked floor and walls pocked with holes, but it offered privacy and security. Jace set down his pack and began checking his supplies, water, rations, a few weapons, and tools. He started reinforcing the weak points of the outpost: a broken door, a hole in the wall, a collapsed roof beam. Every repair he made was careful and precise, born of years of experience surviving in harsh conditions. Lyra watched him silently, her large eyes following every motion. She didn't speak much, only occasionally offering a soft sound that seemed like approval. Kilo stayed close to her side, observing Jace with curiosity. There was a quiet tension in the room, the kind that comes when strangers are forced together by circumstance. But beneath it, there was also trust beginning to grow. As night fell, Jace lit a small lantern. The soft glow illuminated the trio, casting their shadows on the walls. He sat down, exhausted, but kept a watchful eye on the two. The desert was dangerous, and he could not afford to relax completely. Bandits were always nearby, and the desert itself could kill as easily as any human. Lyra finally spoke again in a whisper. "Why, help us?" Her voice carried no accusation, only wonder. Jace considered this. He could have left them to die or turned them over for profit. Most people wouldn't have hesitated, but he could not do that. Something about their vulnerability, their courage to survive despite everything, resonated with him. "Because I know what it feels like to be hunted," he said, "and no one deserves that. Not you, not the child. And if they discovered that Lyra and Kilo were hidden here, the outpost would not keep them safe for long. He resolved to make improvements, to fortify their position, and to teach them how to survive in this harsh world. Over the next few days, Jace began sharing his knowledge. He taught Lyra how to find water from hidden sources, how to avoid leaving tracks in the sand, and how to recognize signs of approaching enemies. Kilo, despite his small size, absorbed every lesson, showing an innate intelligence and a curiosity that reminded Jace of himself at a younger age. Lyra, in turn, shared what she could about her species. Their language was complex, but she simplified it for communication. She told Jace about her world, about the raids that had forced her to flee, and about the energy her child could manipulate, an ability the bandits were eager to exploit. Jace listened carefully, understanding the stakes. They were not just running for survival. They were protecting something precious, something the bandits would stop at nothing to claim. Jace reinforced the outpost with improvised barriers and traps. He positioned mirrors and reflective surfaces to create illusions of movement, hoping to confuse any scout who approached. He dug false trails leading away from the outpost, hoping to mislead pursuers. Every day he became more confident that they could hold their ground, at least for a little while. Yet, despite all precautions, a sense of tension hung in the air. The desert was vast, but bandits were relentless. It was only a matter of time before they discovered the outpost. Jace did not sleep deeply, listening for the slightest sound, footsteps, the hum of a vehicle, even the whisper of the wind across the sand that might hide approaching danger. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the desert in a blood-red glow, Jace noticed something unsettling. A small set of tracks had appeared near the edge of the outpost's perimeter. They were fresh. Someone had been scouting them, testing the defenses. His heart tightened. The bandits were closer than he thought. He looked at Lyra and Kilo, who were sitting quietly, unaware of the discovery. He felt a surge of protectiveness, stronger than anything he had felt in years. He would not let anyone harm them, not here, not in his world. That night, Jace sat on the roof of the outpost, watching the desert stretch endlessly into darkness. Stars glittered above, distant and cold, but they offered a strange kind of comfort. He thought about the journey ahead, about the challenges they would face, and about the small spark of hope that now lived in this abandoned place. He didn't know what the bandits would do or when they would strike. But he knew one thing: as long as he lived, he would protect Lyra and Kilo. The desert had taught him that survival required more than strength. It required cunning, courage, and a willingness to fight for what mattered. And for the first time in years, Jace felt something he had almost forgotten, a sense of purpose, a reason to keep moving forward. The night was silent, but Jace knew it was only the calm before the storm. The sun rose slowly over the desert, painting the sand with shades of gold and orange. Jace stirred from his rough sleeping mat, his eyes already scanning the horizon. He had barely slept, listening for any unusual sounds, any hint of approaching danger. Lyra and Kilo were still asleep, huddled together in the corner room. The little outpost was quiet, almost peaceful, but Jace knew better. Bandits never rested. They were patient hunters, and sooner or later they would find their way here. He moved silently through the outpost, checking traps and barriers. A few small adjustments, tightening a few wires and reinforcing weak points, and he felt slightly more confident. It was never enough, never truly safe, but it was better than nothing. He glanced at the tracks he had seen last night, still faintly visible in the sand beyond the perimeter. Fresh. They had returned, or worse, someone had left them deliberately as a warning. He shook off the thought and went to the small corner where Lyra and Kilo slept. Lyra stirred as he approached, her eyes opening slowly. "Morning," Jace said softly, offering a faint smile. "You slept well." "I can handle them." Despite his small size, there was something about Kilo that made Jace cautious. His abilities, whatever they were, had already hinted at potential far beyond his years. "We need to move," Jace said quietly. "Or prepare to fight. I prefer to fight on our terms." Jace taught Lyra how to use some of the traps he had rigged, simple but effective mechanisms that could slow or confuse an attacker. Kilo watched closely, absorbing every detail, and Jace found himself impressed. The child's instincts were sharp, almost unnatural. He had faced many dangers in his life, but Kilo seemed to understand more than he should at his age. By mid-morning, the desert heat had risen sharply, and the shimmering waves of air made distant objects appear as illusions. Jace positioned reflective surfaces around the outpost to create the illusion of movement. Small mirrors angled carefully would make anyone approaching think there were multiple defenders inside. It was a trick he had used before, and he hoped it would buy them time. Hours passed in tense silence. Occasionally, the wind carried distant sounds, perhaps the movement of sand or the faint hum of engines. Jace kept alert, knowing that patience was as important as strength. Bandits were patient, but so was he. The outpost was a trap of sorts, designed not to lure attackers in directly, but to create confusion and exhaustion. He knew that even the most skilled warriors could be defeated by clever use of terrain and preparation. As the sun climbed higher, Lyra grew restless. "We cannot hide forever," she said, her voice soft but firm. "They will find us. If they come, I'll give you a signal." At first, it was barely noticeable, a faint shimmer in the heat, but soon Jace could make out shapes, several figures on hover bikes moving slowly across the dunes. The bandits had arrived, and they were cautious, as if they had learned about the traps before. Jace felt a surge of adrenaline. This was what he had prepared for. He signaled to Lyra, who crouched low with Kilo, and readied himself. The bandits approached the outpost, their figures casting long shadows in the setting sun. Jace had time to think, to plan, and that was enough. He triggered the first set of traps, false paths of sand that collapsed under weight, leading the bandits into small pits. The illusions of movement created by the mirrors made it appear as if defenders were everywhere. The bandits were not easily fooled, but the combination of deception and terrain slowed them down. Hover bikes toppled into hidden traps, and Jace took advantage of the confusion to strike. He used improvised weapons, chains, ropes, and weighted debris to disrupt the attackers, knocking several off balance. Every move was precise, calculated, a dance of survival against overwhelming odds. Lyra watched wide-eyed as Jace fought. She had seen humans capable of courage, but this was more than courage. This was intelligence, creativity, and a willingness to risk everything for others. She realized that in this harsh desert, humans were not just survivors, they were warriors, capable of outthinking enemies even when outnumbered. Kilo, sensing the tension, did something unexpected. A faint glow appeared around his small hands, and the air seemed to shimmer as energy radiated outward. One of the bandits was thrown off his hover bike as if struck by an invisible force, tumbling into a sand pit. Jace's eyes widened. The child's abilities were real and powerful. He quickly adjusted his tactics, using Kilo's energy indirectly to their advantage. The battle continued, a tense back and forth. Jace kept moving, using the traps he had prepared and improvising new ones from debris and sand. Every attack from the bandits was met with resistance, every advance slowed. And always he watched over Lyra and Kilo, making sure they remained safe. Hours passed, and the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the desert. Exhausted but determined, Jace had managed to drive the bandits back temporarily. They were cautious now, regrouping at the edge of the outpost, planning their next move. Jace knew this was only the beginning. Bandits were relentless, and they would not leave easily. Lyra finally spoke, her voice trembling with awe. "You protect us. You fight for us." "I protect what matters. You and Kilo matter. That's enough reason to fight." Every lesson was a preparation for survival, a transfer of human ingenuity and skill. As they sat in the dim light, Jace thought about what was coming. The bandits would not give up. They would return, stronger, better prepared, and more dangerous. But he also knew something they did not. Humans could think, adapt, and endure. He had survived the desert for years because he understood it, and he could survive the bandits if he remained clever and focused. Lyra, noticing his resolve, placed a hand on his arm. "We trust you," she said softly. "Thank you." The desert had taught him many lessons, but the most important one was this: protecting those who cannot protect themselves was worth any risk. That night, Jace stayed awake on the roof of the outpost, scanning the horizon. The stars were bright, distant, and cold, but they offered clarity. Somewhere out there, the bandits were planning their next move. He would be ready. He had to be. And so, as the desert winds whispered through the ruined outpost, a quiet determination settled over him. He would not let anyone harm Lyra or Kilo. He would fight, outthink, and endure. Because in this harsh world, human ingenuity and courage were the most dangerous weapons of all. The first battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The desert was merciless. Heat shimmered off the sand, making the horizon blur like a mirage. Jace led Lyra and Kilo along a narrow ridge, careful to avoid leaving tracks in the soft sand. Every step mattered. The bandits were clever, and even after the earlier encounter, they would not give up. Jace knew this. Patience and caution were now as important as speed. Lyra held Kilo's hand tightly. The child's energy seemed quiet for now, but Jace could feel it. like a low hum in the air, waiting. Kilo's eyes darted around constantly, watching the desert as if sensing something beyond sight. Jace had noticed it during the fight at the outpost. Sometimes the child reacted before any danger appeared. It was a strange, powerful gift, and it made Jace even more protective. They moved in silence for a long while. The desert stretched endlessly, a sea of gold with scattered rocks breaking the monotony. Jace kept glancing behind them, scanning for any signs of pursuit. Every ridge, every dune could hide movement. He had learned to read subtle changes, the way sand shifted, the faint hum of engines, the whisper of wind over obstacles. He trusted his instincts, honed by years of survival. Lyra finally spoke, her voice low. "How far do we go?" She sounded tired, her steps slowing. "We cannot run forever. If we can reach it, we can hide and use the terrain to our advantage." As they approached the canyon, the temperature began to drop slightly. The sun's angle shifted, and the shadows lengthened, revealing the deep crevices and jagged cliffs that made the canyon a natural fortress. Jace's heart lifted slightly. Here, they could prepare, make traps, and perhaps turn the desert itself against the bandits. He led them along a narrow path that wound between the cliffs. It was treacherous but manageable for someone with experience. Loose rocks crunched under their feet, and one wrong step could send a person tumbling into the depths below. Lyra followed closely, guiding Kilo carefully, while Jace scouted ahead, constantly scanning for signs of pursuit. Hours passed. The desert's silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional cry of a distant bird or the whisper of wind. Jace had to pause, crouching behind a rock outcrop to catch his breath. He checked the horizon, nothing. No signs of bandits yet. Good, but that did not mean they were safe. Bandits could cover ground quickly if they knew the terrain. Jace reminded himself that patience was key. They found a small alcove along the canyon wall, sheltered from view. Jace guided Lyra and Kilo inside. The space was cramped but secure, hidden from any casual glance. He began checking the surroundings, identifying points where they could set traps or create obstacles. The canyon itself would do much of the work, forcing pursuers into narrow passes where they could be ambushed or misled. Lyra watched him work silently. "You very clever," she said finally. Her voice carried awe and respect. "Humans survive anything." Jace felt the power like a gentle pulse, knowing it could be a tremendous advantage if used wisely. But he also understood the danger. If the bandits discovered the child's abilities, they would stop at nothing to exploit them. Protecting Kilo was now as important as protecting Lyra. The sun began to dip behind the cliffs, and the desert's colors shifted to deep oranges and purples. Shadows stretched across the canyon floor, creating natural hiding places and ambush points. Jace began setting traps using rocks, ropes, and improvised weights. He positioned reflective surfaces to create illusions, just like he had at the outpost. Every detail mattered. Every move could save their lives. Night fell quickly in the canyon. The air became cooler and the stars emerged, glittering like distant fires. Jace crouched with Lyra and Kilo in their small alcove, keeping watch. Silence stretched around them, but it was a tense, waiting silence. He could feel the presence of the bandits somewhere beyond the ridges, patient and relentless. Hours passed. Then, faintly, the sound of engines reached him, low, distant, careful. The bandits had found them. Jace felt his pulse quicken but kept his expression calm. "Stay low," he whispered to Lyra. "Let me handle them." The scout barely avoided the rocks, but his bike skidded and crashed into a sandbank. Jace moved quickly, signaling to Lyra and Kilo to stay hidden as he prepared the next trap. One by one, the bandits appeared, attempting to navigate the treacherous canyon paths. Jace used every advantage: narrow cliffs that forced the enemy into single-file movement, reflective surfaces to confuse them, and rocks suspended by ropes to fall at the right moment. Every strike was precise, calculated, exploiting the terrain rather than brute force. Kilo, sensing danger, allowed his energy to flare. Small bursts of power disrupted the bandits' movements, knocking bikes off balance and causing temporary confusion. Jace used this opportunity to guide the mother and child to safer positions while continuing to control the battlefield. The bandits grew frustrated. They were skilled, but their usual tactics failed against Jace's preparation and the canyon's natural advantages. Every trap, every obstacle slowed them, and every misstep cost them time and momentum. Hours of careful maneuvers passed. Exhaustion was setting in on all sides. The bandits paused, regrouping at the canyon entrance, trying to figure out a way to overcome the traps. Jace knew this was temporary. They would not give up. Bandits rarely did, but he also knew that the desert and canyon were allies. With patience and strategy, even a few determined defenders could withstand a larger, stronger force. Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. They come again. We cannot hold forever. Watch, learn, and be ready to move if needed. He handed her a small reflector and a piece of rope, showing her how to create minor diversions if necessary. Even small things can make a difference. He would have to protect Kilo until he could control it fully. Night deepened. The desert winds shifted, carrying dust and distant sounds. Jace stayed vigilant, using the stars to navigate and monitor movement. Hours passed without further engagement. The bandits seemed to have paused, perhaps waiting for reinforcements or planning a more direct assault. Jace allowed himself a moment of reflection. He had survived countless dangers in this desert, but nothing like this. Protecting Lyra and Kilo was not just survival, it was a test of ingenuity, courage, and human determination. He realized that humans were not just strong or fast, they could think, adapt, and endure in ways others could not. This was the true essence of survival in a harsh world. As the night wore on, a distant light flickered on a ridge far away. Jace's eyes narrowed. The bandits were preparing something, likely a larger attack. He knew they would not wait long. The next encounter would be dangerous, possibly decisive. But he was ready. They had the canyon, the traps, and the child's abilities on their side. They had him, and he would not fail. The first streaks of dawn appeared over the canyon, casting soft light over the rugged cliffs. Jace looked down at Lyra and Kilo, both asleep for a moment, exhausted from the long night. He felt a surge of determination. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Human ingenuity, courage, and adaptability would carry them through. The desert had taught him this lesson countless times, and now it would save 3 lives. And somewhere in the shadows, the bandits watched, patient and relentless, unaware that the humans they hunted were far more dangerous than they realized. The pursuit was far from over. But Jace knew one thing with certainty: he would not let them catch Lyra and Kilo. Not here. Not ever. The morning sun cut through the canyon, painting the jagged cliffs in brilliant gold and deep shadow. Jace crouched behind a rock, scanning the narrow pass ahead. The desert winds had shifted during the night, scattering sand and changing the appearance of his traps, but he had anticipated that. The canyon was now a deadly maze, carefully prepared to turn the terrain into a weapon. Every rock, every rope, every false path was meant to give them an advantage. Lyra and Kilo stayed close, hidden behind a natural outcropping. The child's small hands glowed faintly, as though sensing the danger that was about to arrive. Jace studied the horizon and smiled grimly. The bandits were here in force, dozens of them, their hover bikes glinting in the sunlight as they moved cautiously through the canyon entrance. At their head was a taller figure, imposing and heavily augmented with cybernetics, a warlord who clearly led the group. Jace adjusted his position, keeping low and moving silently between rocks. Every detail mattered. He triggered small diversions to slow the attackers, ropes that pulled rocks down narrow paths, false trails of sand to mislead them, and reflective surfaces that made it appear as if more defenders were waiting ahead. The bandits were skilled, but Jace had the home advantage. He knew the canyon like the back of his hand, and he had prepared for this day. The first bandit approached a narrow path that Jace had rigged. A cascade of rocks tumbled down, sending the man sprawling. Hover bikes skidded as they tried to avoid the debris, and several attackers collided or fell into hidden pits. Jace used the confusion to move closer, guiding Lyra and Kilo to a safer position while the attackers struggled. Kilo's energy flared again, brighter this time. A wave of force knocked a group of bandits off balance, sending some tumbling into narrow crevices. Jace realized the child was instinctively defending them, and he knew he could use this power strategically without endangering the little one. The bandit warlord roared in frustration, pointing toward Jace's position. His cybernetic enhancements glinted in the sunlight, a mixture of metal and advanced technology. He seemed unstoppable, but Jace did not fear him. He had faced stronger opponents before, and he had the advantage of knowledge, preparation, and human ingenuity. The bandits pressed forward, attempting to flank Jace, but the canyon's natural geography funneled them into predictable paths. Jace had placed weighted nets and hanging boulders that he could release at the right moment. As the attackers advanced, several were caught in traps, crashing into rocks or becoming entangled. The canyon itself had become a weapon in Jace's hands. Lyra watched, eyes wide, as Jace maneuvered through the battlefield. "Humans, very clever," she whispered to herself. She had always known her species was strong, but watching Jace use the environment so skillfully, she realized that humans could be terrifying when their survival was at stake. Hours passed. The bandits were persistent, pressing their attack, but they were being worn down. Jace moved constantly, never staying in one spot for long. He improvised new traps on the fly, using the child's energy to disorient and confuse the attackers further. Even the warlord seemed momentarily unsettled, struggling to anticipate Jace's strategy. At one point, the bandits tried to rush a narrow choke point where Jace had set multiple traps. He released a series of rocks from above, knocking several off balance. Kilo sent out a controlled burst of energy, sending two more tumbling into the canyon floor. Jace sprinted forward, knocking down another attacker with a well-aimed swing of a weighted rope. Every move was deliberate, every action precise. Lyra realized that this battle was more than brute force. It was strategy, thinking ahead, predicting the enemy's movements. Humans were not just fighters, they were planners, problem solvers, and survivors. She felt a sense of awe and trust, knowing that with Jace guiding them, they had a chance to survive against overwhelming odds. The warlord, frustrated by repeated failures, decided to take matters into his own hands. He charged through the canyon, cybernetic limbs glinting as he moved with unnatural speed and strength. Jace watched carefully, analyzing every movement. The warlord's power was formidable, but he had one weakness: predictability. Each step, each motion could be anticipated if observed carefully. Jace lured him toward a narrow section of the canyon where Kilo's energy could be most effective. "Now," Jace whispered, signaling the child. Kilo's hands glowed intensely, sending out a controlled surge of energy that knocked the warlord off balance, causing him to stumble into a trap Jace had set, a pit lined with sharp rocks. The warlord roared, but he was trapped, unable to move as Jace approached cautiously. Jace faced him, aware of the danger. One wrong move could end everything. But he relied on human ingenuity and careful calculation rather than brute strength. He used a combination of ropes, weighted rocks, and clever leverage to subdue the warlord, keeping him immobilized without causing fatal harm. The remaining bandits, seeing their leader trapped, faltered, unsure how to continue the assault. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes bright with determination. She had never felt safer and yet more empowered. "You, clever human," she said, voice filled with gratitude. "You fight like the desert itself defends you." The bandits, battered and demoralized, retreated, leaving the canyon under human control. Jace took a deep breath, exhausted but exhilarated. The battle had been long and dangerous, but they had survived through strategy, intelligence, and courage. Human resilience had turned the tide against overwhelming odds. Lyra approached Kilo, holding him tightly. "We safe because of him," she said softly, looking at Jace. "He, human protector." They spent the rest of the day reinforcing their position, using debris and rocks to make additional obstacles. Jace taught Lyra how to set minor traps, showing her that survival required both intelligence and action. Kilo, exhausted but attentive, observed and practiced controlling his energy, guided by Jace's careful instructions. Night fell again and the desert winds whispered through the canyon. Jace sat with Lyra and Kilo in their alcove, reflecting on the day. The bandits would return eventually. They never gave up. But now he had gained something priceless: knowledge of their strategy and the confidence that they could withstand the next attack. The stars twinkled overhead, distant and cold, but offering clarity and perspective. Jace realized that survival was more than strength or speed. It was thinking ahead, understanding your environment, and using every tool at your disposal. That was humanity's greatest weapon: ingenuity. Lyra looked at him with a quiet awe. "Humans very strong," she whispered. "Not just body. Mind too." Human cunning, combined with the unique abilities of Kilo and the courage of Lyra, gave them an advantage that no brute force could match. As the desert night deepened, Jace remained vigilant, scanning the horizon, listening to the whispers of the wind, and preparing for whatever challenges lay ahead. The canyon battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Yet he knew one thing with certainty: with strategy, intelligence, and courage, humans could face any threat and survive. And somewhere in the distance, hidden by the shadows of the cliffs, the bandits watched, silent but plotting. They had learned that these humans were not easy prey, and next time they would need more than force. But Jace was ready. He had the desert, his wits, and his companions, and together they would endure whatever came next. The fight was far from finished, but for now the canyon belonged to them. The morning sun barely touched the canyon's peaks when Jace woke, alert and restless. The night had been quiet, almost too quiet, and that made him uneasy. He knew the bandits would not give up. They were patient, cunning, and dangerous. And now, after their last failure, they would be furious. Lyra and Kilo slept in the alcove, exhausted but unharmed. Jace watched them for a moment, feeling a surge of protectiveness. They had survived the desert, the outpost, and the canyon battle because he had planned, adapted, and fought with everything he had. But the final confrontation was still ahead. He knew the warlord would return, likely with reinforcements, seeking vengeance. He moved silently through the canyon, checking the traps he had set the previous day. Rocks were shifted, ropes secured, and reflective surfaces realigned. Everything had to be perfect. One mistake could cost them their lives. Jace knew that victory was not just about strength, it was about intelligence, preparation, and adaptability. Lyra stirred, sensing his movement. "We ready?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling slightly. Jace nodded. "We do what we must. Stay close to Kilo and trust me. Everything will depend on how we act, not on how many enemies they send." He radiated power and confidence, expecting that fear would follow him. Jace stayed calm. He had no illusions about the danger, but he had the advantage of knowledge and preparation. He guided Lyra and Kilo to hidden positions, making sure they were safe while he moved to take control of the battlefield. Every step was deliberate, every action calculated. Survival was not a gamble, it was a strategy. The bandits advanced into the canyon. The terrain narrowed, forcing them into predictable paths just as Jace had anticipated. He triggered the first traps, weighted boulders tumbled down, ropes snapped, and pits swallowed several attackers. The bandits faltered, surprised by the efficiency of the defenses. Kilo's energy flared subtly, knocking a few more off balance. Jace realized the child was instinctively protecting them, sensing danger before it arrived. He signaled Kilo to focus, guiding the energy bursts to disrupt the bandits' formations without endangering the little one. The combination of human strategy and Kilo's abilities was proving unstoppable. The bandits pressed forward, frustrated but relentless. The canyon echoed with the sound of crashing rocks, shouting, and the hum of engines. Jace moved with precision, striking from hidden positions, using ropes, weighted objects, and the terrain itself to incapacitate attackers. Every move counted, every action aimed to delay, mislead, or disable. The warlord, growing impatient, decided to intervene personally. He charged through the canyon, cybernetic limbs enhancing his speed and strength. Jace watched carefully, analyzing his movements. The warlord was powerful, but he was also predictable in his aggression. Jace used the narrow terrain to force him into a trap, a narrow passage lined with loose rocks and weighted nets. As the warlord moved into the trap, Kilo unleashed a controlled surge of energy. The force knocked the warlord off balance, sending him into a tangle of ropes and nets. He struggled, trying to rise, but the combination of Jace's carefully positioned traps and Kilo's power immobilized him. The remaining bandits, seeing their leader trapped, hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. Jace approached the warlord, moving cautiously but confidently. He relied on his human ingenuity rather than brute force, using leverage, ropes, and rocks to keep the warlord restrained without causing fatal harm. The canyon echoed with the sounds of struggle and determination, but Jace's calm, calculated approach dominated the battle. Lyra stepped forward, watching closely, her eyes filled with awe. "You clever," she said softly. "Humans not just strong, smart too." The canyon's terrain, combined with traps and careful positioning, made escape difficult. One by one, the bandits either fell into pits, tangled in ropes, or were blocked by obstacles. Exhausted and demoralized, they finally fled, leaving the canyon to Jace, Lyra, and Kilo. Jace exhaled deeply, the tension easing slightly. The battle was over. The bandits were defeated not by sheer strength but by human ingenuity, courage, and strategic thinking. Lyra approached Kilo, holding him close. "We safe," she said softly, looking at Jace. Jace crouched beside them, placing a hand on Kilo's small shoulder. "For now," he said gently. "The desert is not done testing us, but we survived. And that matters." The sun climbed high, and the heat shimmered over the sand, but Jace felt a sense of accomplishment. They had survived against overwhelming odds, using intelligence, courage, and teamwork. The battle had tested them, but it had also strengthened the bond between human and alien, mother and child, protector and protected. In the late afternoon, they moved deeper into the canyon, finding a hidden alcove shielded from view. Jace inspected the space carefully, ensuring it was secure and comfortable. Lyra and Kilo settled in, exhausted but safe. Jace allowed himself a moment of reflection. He realized that survival was not just about physical strength or weapons. It was about thinking, adapting, and using every resource wisely. That was humanity's greatest weapon. Lyra looked at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. "You, human protector," she said softly. "We owe you much." It's about working together, using our minds, our courage, and our hearts. As night fell, the desert winds whispered through the canyon. Jace stayed vigilant, scanning the horizon for any signs of the bandits' return. But for now, the canyon was theirs. The battle had been won, the immediate threat defeated. They had survived through clever planning, quick thinking, and trust in each other. Jace knew the bandits might return someday, but he also knew that humans were not easily defeated. They adapted, learned, and endured. He had survived the desert for years, faced countless dangers, and now had two companions who trusted him completely. Together, they could face any challenge. The night deepened, and stars twinkled overhead, distant and brilliant. The canyon was quiet, peaceful for the first time since the bandits' arrival. Jace allowed himself a moment of rest, knowing that the battle was over, but the journey was far from complete. Survival was a continuous test, and they had passed this one. Lyra and Kilo slept beside him, and for the first time in a long while, Jace felt a sense of calm. He had protected them, guided them, and fought for their survival. The bond between them was strong, forged in the heat of danger and the tests of the desert. Jace looked at the stars and thought about the future. The desert was harsh, the bandits were relentless, but human courage, intelligence, and ingenuity would endure. They had survived, and that was proof of what humans were capable of. As the wind whispered through the canyon, Jace felt a sense of purpose. Protecting those who could not protect themselves was worth any risk. The desert had tested him, the bandits had challenged him, but he had prevailed. He knew that as long as he remained vigilant, clever, and courageous, they would continue to survive. And somewhere in the distance, the bandits would remember this lesson. Humans were not easy prey. They were thinkers, fighters, and survivors capable of turning even the harshest environment into an advantage. The canyon was theirs for now. But more than that, humanity's spirit, its intelligence, courage, and determination, had triumphed. Jace, Lyra, and Kilo had survived the impossible, and together they would continue to endure, explore, and conquer the challenges of the desert and beyond. The desert was quiet, the stars shone, and for the first time in many days, Jace allowed himself a small smile. They had survived. They had triumphed. And humanity had proven once again that no challenge was too great for those who used their minds, hearts, and courage to face it. The battle had ended. The canyon was safe, and the journey of survival, ingenuity, and trust continued.